It was my first night shift at St. Augustine Asylum, the one everyone warned me about. They said Ward 9 was closed for a reason, but I didn't believe in ghost stories. He hadn't spoken in years, but every morning new drawings appeared. Faces of strangers. Until I realized, every face he drew was someone who'd just died. And then he drew me. I never expected my first night at St. Augustine Asylum to feel like stepping into another world. The rain had started hours before my shift, drumming steadily against the pavement and pooling in the cracked asphalt outside the asylum gates. I parked my car under the flickering street lamp, the cold moonlight reflecting off the wet leaves like pale ghosts. Even from a distance, the building's silhouette loomed like a giant waiting to swallow me whole. Broken windows, ivy clawing its way up the walls, paint peeling in long curling strips. As I approached, the front doors groaned when I pushed them open. The smell hit me immediately. Antiseptic mixed with something more sour, stale, the kind of odor that makes your stomach tighten. Water dripped from the ceiling tiles above, forming tiny rivulets along the walls. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, throwing the hallway into intermittent shadows. My footsteps echoed as I moved forward, each tap against the tiles sounding impossibly loud in the oppressive silence. I had been briefed by the supervisor. Ward 9 is quiet. Don't bother the patient unless absolutely necessary. I didn't know what I expected, maybe a frail old man sitting quietly, staring at the walls. What I found was far more unsettling. The padded cell was dark, only lit by the faint glow of a single lamp dangling crookedly from the ceiling. He was there, hunched over the floor, drawing rapidly on large sheets of paper scattered around him. His movements were deliberate but frantic, charcoal smudging across his hands, the tip of the pencil breaking occasionally under his grip. I stepped closer, trying to get a better look without disturbing him. His face remained downcast, obscured by unkempt hair, but when he finally lifted his head, his eyes were unnaturally alert, piercing. There was no recognition of me, but an intensity in them that felt too knowing. I shivered. There was something in those eyes, something that whispered of secrets I wasn't supposed to see. I dared to look at his drawings. The floor was littered with hundreds of sheets, faces one after another, each meticulously detailed, each expression frozen in terror or grief. I assumed they were sketches from his own imagination, until I noticed something unsettling. The faces were familiar. Not from the hospital but from the city. People I had seen on the news, missing persons posters, accident reports. My stomach tightened. I froze when I spotted a new sheet, one that had not been there moments before. I hadn't touched any of the papers. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It was a car crash scene, the mangled metal, twisted limbs, rain splattering across the road, rendered in horrifying detail. My heart stopped when I turned to the small TV mounted in the corner of the cell block. A news bulletin was reporting an accident exactly like the one in the drawing. It had just happened minutes ago across town. I stepped back, unsure if I was dreaming. The man hadn't moved, hadn't even glanced up. Yet the paper was there, as if waiting for me. My instincts screamed to leave, to call someone, but some part of me wanted to understand. I knelt down, eyes scanning the floor for the next drawing, only to find a fresh sheet showing my own face. Eyes wide in terror, I dropped the paper. My hands shook. His head lifted again, this time fully meeting my gaze. A faint, almost imperceptible smile curled across his lips. It was not a welcoming smile. It was a knowing, inevitable one. I don't remember how long I stood there, paralyzed by a mixture of fascination and fear. The hallway outside seemed to stretch impossibly long, flickering lights casting shadows that moved without reason. Every instinct screamed that I should run, but some inexplicable force held me in place, forcing me to look at the drawings, to witness the future that he saw, or perhaps the future he made. And then it hit me. The hospital wasn't just old, decrepit. haunted in the usual sense. It was alive. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the light, every drawing on the floor whispered of the suffering contained within its walls. The patient wasn't merely insane. He was the keeper of deaths, the chronicler of the unseen. And somehow, inexorably, I was now part of his story. I couldn't shake the image of my own terrified face staring up at me from the floor. Even after leaving the padded cell, the memory lingered, an invisible weight pressing against my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was coincidence, some cruel trick of my imagination. But the ambulance outside the hospital, the news bulletins replaying the car accident, it was all too precise, too real. I started spending longer hours in Ward 9, ostensibly to check on the patient but mostly to observe. Each time I entered, the papers on the floor had multiplied. Faces, places, accidents, all rendered in meticulous detail. The charred tips of pencils, smudges on hands, the sharp scratch of charcoal against thick paper. It became a rhythm I couldn't ignore. I began to notice patterns. Deaths didn't just appear. They followed his drawings. A figure slouched over a sheet depicting a burning house, and hours later, a fire consumed a home in the city. A sketch of a subway collapse appeared, and the next morning, the headlines confirmed it. I was no longer an observer. I was part of a ticking clock, waiting for the next page to show me what would die. Sleep became impossible. Every night I dreamed of the asylum, wandering endless corridors lined with drawings that moved and twisted, faces screaming silently. I awoke with papers scattered around my apartment, sketches I didn't remember taking. Coffee cups were overturned. My phone displayed numbers and news alerts that I hadn't checked. The asylum's grip reached beyond its walls. I finally confronted the supervisor. He's predicting deaths, I said, my voice trembling. Every sketch, every face, it happens. The old man blinked slowly. Predicting? He asked. His voice was calm, almost too calm. No, he's not predicting. He's creating. My stomach dropped. Creating? Yes. Each drawing, each image. It's a blueprint for what is to come. The city outside, the people, they are extensions of his canvas. The patient isn't sick. He's a conduit. I couldn't accept it. Not at first. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, a sickly trick of reality. But the evidence was undeniable. A drawing of a fire in a downtown apartment building appeared. By morning, a fire consumed the top floors of a nearby complex. Faces of victims I didn't recognize stared at me from the papers, smudged and crying out silently. That I became obsessed. I watched him, studied him, noted every movement, every pattern in his drawing. He was meticulous. Each sketch came with subtle changes, the angle of the street, the position of the sun, the time of day. It was as if he were replaying reality in charcoal before it happened. The hospital itself seemed to respond. Hallways twisted unnaturally. Doors that had been on one floor appeared elsewhere. I found myself lost in familiar corridors that led to rooms I had never seen. Charcoal drawings lined the walls, maps, warning signs, distorted faces. It was a maze designed to keep me inside, to pull me deeper into his world. One evening I stayed past midnight. The ward was empty, save for him and the lamp. I watched him draw something different this time, not a person, not a disaster. It was me. My face, my hands, my eyes wide with fear. Charcoal pressed hard into the paper, leaving grooves I could almost feel under my fingertips. A sudden chill swept through the room. The lamp flickered violently, and the air smelled of smoke and ash. My reflection appeared in the small cracked mirror behind him. Only my eyes were hollow, blackened as if I were a corpse staring back. I heard a whisper, not from him but from the walls themselves. A low, sibilant hissing repeating my name. The floorboards creaked as if someone was walking behind me. I turned, but the corridor was empty. And yet the sketches moved. Faces twisted, mouths opening to scream silently, eyes following me. I realized then the truth. The asylum was alive. Not the building, but the suffering contained within it. Each patient, each death, each sketch, they fed something, and that something had now noticed me. The descent accelerated. Every day brought new drawings, new warnings. I could no longer tell what was real and what was prediction. News alerts, emails, street signs, all reflected the drawings on the floor. I stopped leaving the hospital. The streets outside no longer mattered. The ward was now my universe. I tried to reason with him. Why me? Why show me this? He didn't answer. He drew faster. Charcoal flying, smudging everywhere. I watched a pencil tip break and snap, yet he continued undeterred. His drawings weren't just predicting events anymore. They were reshaping them. Days blurred into nights. I became a shadow of myself, consumed by the ward and the patient. And then it happened. A drawing appeared that made my blood run cold. The hospital itself. The hallways twisting impossibly, the lamp flickering, the walls peeling. Every detail perfectly rendered. And at the center, my figure alone, trapped, staring at the paper. I knew then that I wasn't just observing his art. I was inside it. The last thing I remember before everything shifted was the scratching sound. Not from the pencil, but from the walls themselves, like fingernails clawing through plaster. Then the air grew thick, burning, and I was pulled into the paper itself, into the drawings. Reality fractured. The asylum had become a canvas, and I was now part of the artwork, part of the endless descent. The world around me had changed. The ward was no longer a hospital. It was a living canvas, walls stretching into impossible corridors, floors spiraling into voids, and shadows twisting into grotesque parodies of humanity. The patient's charcoal drawings now dominated everything. Each line, each stroke pulsed with the life of its own. I realized with growing dread that I had become part of the art. I called out to him, "Why are you doing this? Who are you really?" He paused, his hand hovering over the paper. His eyes were empty, hollow pools reflecting the chaos he'd created. "I don't do it for me," he whispered. "I do it for them, for the ones who were forgotten. The pain that built this place, the suffering that's been erased. I give it form." I shuddered. "You're controlling it. All of this." "Yes. But I cannot undo what has been done. You are here because you care. You see the faces. You see the suffering. Now you must decide. Reveal it to the world or become part of it forever." I looked around. The walls writhed, charcoal lines snapping into forms, hands clawing from the floor, faces screaming from the ceiling, smoke and ash filling the air. The asylum was alive, and it watched me. That I felt my own hands shaking. I had a choice. Escape with the knowledge of what had happened, or be trapped in the patient's artwork forever. I stepped forward. If I leave, how do I warn anyone? How do I expose the truth? He drew a final sketch. My figure walking out of the asylum, pen in hand, eyes wide with fear but resolute. Then you leave with a fragment. Only you can show the world, and only if you survive the journey. I hesitated. The hallway before me twisted endlessly, stairs folding into walls, doors opening to nowhere. I realized that the asylum itself was testing me. Every step forward could trap me permanently, make me part of the canvas. The first obstacle was a room of mirrors. My reflection stared back, but each reflection moved independently. Faces contorted, whispers echoing my fears. I had to focus one step at a time, or I would become lost inside the mirrored hallucination forever. I reached the center where the largest sketch of all lay on the floor. The city itself, drawn in terrifying detail, lines converging toward a single point, my exit. I felt the walls closing in, the charcoal bleeding into the air like smoke. I ran, dodging hands and faces that reached for me, each movement synchronized with the patient's strokes. Finally, I saw the exit, a sliver of moonlight. But standing in front of it was a form, the patient or perhaps his creation. "You can't leave without taking responsibility," he said. "What responsibility?" I gasped. "To show the world. To let people know. To remember the forgotten. Leave it hidden, and you are as complicit as I am." I nodded. I understood. I would survive, but only to expose the horrors hidden in plain sight. I stepped through the moonlight. The asylum dissolved behind me. Walls collapsing, smoke and ash fading, sketches disappearing into nothingness. I was free, carrying the truth, the burden, and a fragment of the patient's vision. Outside, the city slept. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the empty street, documenting everything. I knew what I had to do. Weeks later, the fragments of sketches began appearing online. Anonymous posts, viral images of forgotten faces, charred buildings, and subtle warnings. The world began to see the horrors hidden in the shadows, the abuses erased by time that I had survived. I had carried the truth, and somewhere in the distance I could feel the patient's gaze. Approving, waiting, knowing the cycle would continue if others forgot.